Hello everyone, I'm so excited you guys are here. I hope you're having a wonderful, wonderful day so far. Today I want to talk to you about something that most life insurance agents are getting wrong. And I want to talk about it through a book that I've been reading and reading it for a long time now, which is Robert Cialdini's Influence. Specifically the chapter on authority, because the more I work with agents and the more I look at my own first 10 seconds on a discovery call, the more I realize that prospects are running a filter on us before we even open our mouth. And most agents are failing the filter without even knowing that there's a filter. So with that being said, let me tell you what Cialdini found, and then let me show you exactly how it applies to life insurance agents, and more specifically how it applies to a life insurance agent who is trying to book appointments, close cases, and stop hearing, hey, let me check with my spouse. Because once you see this, you cannot unsee it. And Cialdini opens that chapter of authority with one of the most famous experiments in the history of psychology. And it's the Milgram experiment. And it was done at Yale, the university, by a professor named Stanley Milgram. And what Milgram did was he put up an ad in the newspaper looking for volunteers for a study on punishment and memory. Regular people answered the ad, right? It was just published, and I think it was a newspaper. Average people. It was teachers, accountants, businessmen, cross section of normal life, right? They show up to the lab and they're greeted by a guy in a gray lab coat carrying a clipboard. And the guy in the lab coat tells them they're gonna be the teacher. The teacher's job is to deliver electric shocks to a learner in the next room every time the learner gets a question wrong. And the shocks start small, but they get bigger and bigger and bigger as the test goes on, all the way up to like 450 volts actually. Now, the prospect being shocked, the learner, was actually an actor. There were like no real shocks, but the teacher didn't know that. And as far as the teacher knew, the screaming, kicking, begging, pleading person in the next room was being electrocuted by their hand every time the lab coat guy said, please continue. And before the experiment started, Milgram asked psychiatrists, graduate students, and faculty at Yale how many of these regular people are going to go all the way to 450 volts. And the answer was always somewhere around 1 to 2%, maybe 1 in 1,000. Because nobody wanted to believe that a normal person would do that to another human being just because the guy in a lab coat said to keep going. Now, the actual result was 2/3. 2/3 of the people went all the way to 450 volts. Not one of the 40 people in the original study quit when the victim started demanding to be released. And later, when Milgram added in a fake heart condition, when the victim screamed about his heart bothering him, 65% of the teachers kept going to the end anyway. And Milgram said the explanation was a built-in sense of duty to authority that lives in all of us. The guy in the lab coat who had no real authority other than a clipboard and a coat was enough to override every moral instinct these people walked in with. And the fact of the matter is, if you take nothing else from this video, take that. Authority works in a click-where fashion. People do not stop to evaluate it. The signal comes in, the brain says authority, and the body just goes. Now, I want you to hold that in your head for a second, and let me give you the other piece of evidence that Cialdini kind of lays out in that same chapter, because it gets even closer to the world we live in as agents. There was a study done in the early, I think it was the 1980s, if I'm not mistaken, at 3 midwestern hospitals. A group of doctors and also nurses became concerned about how mechanically nurses were following doctor's orders. So they ran a test, and one of the researchers called like 20 different nurses stations across surgical, medical, pediatric, and also psychiatric wards. He called from outside the hospital. He had never met the nurse who picked up. He had no badge. He had no sort of credentials, no proof of who he was. The only thing he had was a voice on the phone and claimed the title of doctor. And he told the nurse to give a patient 20 milligrams of a drug called estrogen. And the drug wasn't on the hospital's approved, like they have like a list of like the medications that are approved or not. It hadn't been cleared for use. And 20 milligrams was like double the maximum daily dose that was printed on the bottle. And hospital policy, even worse, said prescriptions could not be given over the phone. So there were 4 reasons the nurse should have hung up the phone. 95% walked to the medicine cabinet, they pulled the drug, and were on their way to the patient's room to administer it when the researchers stopped them. And there's a famous case in that same chapter Cialdini calls the rectal earache, something like that. A doctor wrote a prescription for eardrops, abbreviated as place in our ear, and the nurse on autopilot put the eardrops in the patient's, you know what? Nobody questioned it. Not the patient, not the nurse, because the doctor said so. So if you think for a second that smart, well-trained, highly educated nurses are going to use professional judgment, and not to talk about nurses, as a matter of fact, I have really good friends that are nurses, just professionals overall. If you think that highly educated professional judgment, when a title walks in the room, the data says they're not using judgment. And neither is your prospect. And so let me bring this home. Cialdini then breaks down the 3 symbols of authority that compliance professionals use to fake the signal. And there are 3. So there's titles, clothes, and trappings. And every single one of them maps directly to what your prospect is scanning for in the first 10 seconds of every Facebook ad, every text message, every voicemail, every Zoom call, every email signature. Most agents miss all 3. So let's go through them one at a time and let me show you what to actually do. So symbol number 1 is titles. Cialdini tells a story about a professor, a friend of his who like travels a lot, and the friend learned to never tell strangers in airports and bars that he's a professor at a major Eastern university. Because the second he says professor, the whole conversation changes. People who were spontaneous and interesting before suddenly get respectful, accepting, and they start agreeing with everything he says. There's an Australian study Cialdini cites where they introduced that the same man to 5 different classes of college students. To one class, he was a student. To another class, a demonstrator. To another, a lecturer. To another, a senior lecturer. To the last class, a full professor. And after he left, every class was asked to like estimate his height. And with each step up in title, his perceived height grew by 1/2 inch. As the professor, he was seen as 2.5 inches taller than as the student. And it was the same man that they were talking about, right? It was just the different title, the different height in the prospect's head was caused because of the title. Now, look at how most agents introduce themselves. They say, hey, I'm John, I'm a licensed life insurance agent. That title is invisible. Every other agent in your state has that title. It signals nothing. It doesn't make you taller in the prospect's brain. It just makes you one more guy with a license, one more gal with a license. So the fix here is, what title can you legitimately put before or after your name that signals you actually do something specific? Are you a certified financial planner? Are you a chartered financial consultant? Are you a chartered life underwriter? I think that's what CLU stands for. Are you a life insurance planner for parents of children with special needs? Are you a buy-sell agreement specialist for businesses with 2 to 5 partners? So like, it doesn't necessarily have to be like professional designation, like a CFP, CHFC, or a CLU. It can also be like how you describe the work that you do. Once again, are you a buy-sell agreement specialist for businesses with 2 to 5 partners? Are you a life insurance strategist for business owners? Are you a living benefits advisor for Florida families ages 30 to 50, right? Like whatever it is, you need a title that earns you the 1/2 inch of perceived height the way the professor earned his. And it has to be true. It has to be something you can actually back up. Because the second a prospect smells the title is fake, you lose authority faster than you would have if you had no title at all. So symbol number 2 is clothing, right? And Cialdini cites a series of studies by a social psychologist named Bickman, something like that. And Bickman would have a young man stop pedestrians on the street and ask them to do an odd thing, like pick up a paper bag or stand on the other side of a bus stop sign. And in half the cases, the requester wore like normal street clothes. In the other half, he wore like a security guard uniform. And way more people complied when he was in the uniform. And in one version, he told pedestrians to give a dime to a guy who was like over parked at a meter 50 feet away, something like that. And then he walked away before the pedestrian even got there. When he was in the uniform, nearly half of them actually did it. When he was in street clothes, fewer than half. And there's another study in Texas where like a 31-year-old man crossed the street against the light. And in half the cases, he wore a freshly pressed like business suit and tie. In the other half, he wore a work shirt and like trousers. And 3.5 times as many pedestrians jaywalked behind the suited guy than behind the work shirt guy, same illegal act, right? Jaywalking, but different clothing. So life insurance agents, your clothes on Zoom are the thing that you can change to change the authority that you're showing to your prospects. Your background is kind of like also very important. Most agents are jumping on Zoom with like a regular shirt, like not a button-up shirt, no suit, no jacket, right? You have to look professional. And if you join from like a Zoom from home, make sure that you have a clear, like nice background, not like a messy bedroom in the background and then wondering why the prospect thinks that you're not a professional, right? It doesn't mean you have to wear a 3-piece suit. Like that's not what I'm saying. It means whatever you wear, whatever the background looks like, whatever the lighting looks like, should signal you are a professional who does this for a living. Not someone the prospect's brain has to give the benefit of the doubt to. You don't want that to happen. And the same applies to your video ads, your voicemail tone, your email signature, your text messages, your social profile pictures. Every single one of those is like an aspect of you that the prospect is scanning before they trust anything you say. Now, the clothing alone is not enough. The clothing just gets you through the first 10 seconds because the third symbol Cialdini talks about is the one that actually carries you through the conversation. And the third symbol Cialdini talks about is the one that actually carries you through the conversation. And that one is trappings. So symbol number 3 is trappings, and Cialdini cites a study where researchers watched what happened when an expensive luxury car was stopped at a green light, and then they watched what happened when an old economy car was stopped at the same green light. With the economy car, almost every driver behind it honked more than once, and 2 of them actually rear-ended it. With the luxury car, 50% of the drivers behind it never touched their horn. They just sat there respectfully and waited. And it was like the same exact green light. I guess what people call it now. It was just different aura. And he calls these trappings. The car, the jewelry, the address, the expensive suit, the little signals that say, in a nutshell, hey, this person is the kind of person who can afford to be here. Now, for an agent, the trappings are not your watch and they're not your car. The trappings are the credentials your prospect can see before they ever talk to you. Your bio, your book, if you have one, your podcast appearances, your published articles, your case studies, your written client letters, your testimonial videos, the associations that you're a part of, right? Or the numbers you've been doing this for, the carriers you've been appointed with, the states you're licensed in. The claim story, you can tell that the prospect can like verify, like those are trappings, and most agents have none of them on display. They have like a profile with vacation photos and a link to schedule a call with me, and then they wonder why the prospect ghosts, because the prospect's brain looked for trappings, didn't see any, and went back to scrolling. And so with that being said, let me show you the 4 lead points. Now, Cialdini gives a prospect a defense against fake authority too, and I think this is the most important part of the chapter for agents to understand, because once you can see what the defense is, you can make sure you pass it. The defense is 2 questions. Question 1, is this authority truly an expert? And question 2, how truthful can we expect this expert to be here? Those are the 2 questions every prospect's brain is asking on your discovery call. is this person truly an expert in my situation? And can I trust that they're telling me the truth instead of just trying to sell me? And one of the ways that I love to actually make them believe and know that you're telling them the truth is by storytelling. If you work with a very specific type of person, you can share the story as to why you work with that specific type of person. Because since the beginning of times, humans have communicated through storytelling. In my case, when I have a meeting with a mother that has a child with special needs, I share the story as to why I work with mothers that have children with special needs. And if you can pass both of those in the first 10 seconds, the first 10 minutes of the call at least, the rest of the call goes a completely different direction. If you can't, no script in the world is going to save you, because the prospect has already filed you under just another life insurance agent's category. And I guess the bottom line of the video is this: you're not building authority to feel important. You're not building it to look impressive on Instagram. You're building authority so the prospect's autopilot brain stops looking for a reason to say no. Because once the prospect's brain says authority, the body just goes. Kind of like the example of that's what Milgram proved at Yale, right, with the shocks. And that's what the nurses proved at the hospital. That's what the pedestrians proved in Texas. And that's what your prospects are doing every single day on your discovery calls without anyone telling them to. So if you fix the signal, the conversations get easier. All of the objections that they're going to throw at you, they get smaller, and you have an easier way to combat those objections. The let me check with my cousin that sells life insurance stops happening because the prospect's brain stops looking for a real authority because they already found one, and it's you. So if you guys have any questions, drop them in the comments. I'm here. I'm rooting for you. You got this. Let's get to work.